Thank you, SCORE Dallas and SCORE Austin as well for putting this on. It's such a wonderful resource. Okay, designing your dream childcare space. We're an architecture firm, but you'll learn in this presentation that there's quite a number of partners that step in and are integral to creating that space. Whether that's a new build, an acquisition, remodel, expansion, really anything that's focused on construction. So we're going to go over these topics today, these 6 topics. Who are you serving? What are your unique program goals? What is the budget and timeline for your project? Site selection, which is a very important, obviously, component. The project team, which, like I said, are the other players that are involved in helping you realize your vision. And then I'll go over some quick shots at the end of some of our portfolio work that we've done. Okay, who are we serving? We all know that infant programs feed into your toddler program and then your preschoolers and then school agers. But we look at who are you serving as who are the building occupants or who are the people that are in and out of your school throughout the day. That's the first thing we look at when we're sort of setting down to design a new early education facility. The next question to sort of ask yourself as you're going into this process is, what are the goals that I'm aligning for my facility that are specific to the community needs? And there are as many of these as we can count, but I've got some up here that to help you sort of focus your decisions. So STEM integration, are we going to be a tech-forward school or a science-based school? Language immersion. There's all sorts of immersion programs. Again, those are definitely having a lot of popularity in some of the urban areas here in Texas. The various Montessori approaches is another sort of program type. The reason I'm sort of mentioning these as different program types is sometimes that program has a different need on the classroom design, on hallway design, on ancillary support spaces design. One that's really trending up, and we're working on a new project now, is neurodivergent accessibility. And there's a whole book of study on different facility considerations for when you're dealing with a population that's neurodivergent, whether that's any sort of ADD, ADHD, language development, anything that affects stimulation, whether it's visual, oral, or even the smells of the space that we're designing. Flexible learning environments, something that's just a more unique, focused program that you've kind of designed on your own. What are the specific physical space, so building, playground, space components that might be unique for that? And then outdoor focused learning. As much as we can get children outside and we can use play, gross motor play, nature-based play to help sort of encourage discovery and growth. So what are my unique program goals? So project, whether large or small, freestanding, ground up, the heavy lift questions are, what is my budget and what is the timeline to develop this project? So a budget is a complicated one, but as long as you go into it and you're aware of all of the sort of moving parts, it's definitely manageable. The one that sort of jumps out if we're talking about building a new building or a remodel is obviously the construction costs, or the hard costs. That would be the building, site work, the land cost. That's another kind of major one. And that can be a stumbling block too for newer programs or younger programs. If the land cost is sort of out of alignment with your overall budget, it can be a real stressor on the project going forward. The project team, that's us as architects. It's also engineers, really any sort of expert you pull in to help put a project together. Another one is permitting fees. So there's building permitting fees. A lot of jurisdictions, especially here in Texas, we've got a lot of communities that are sort of stressed with their water supplies right now. So under those permitting fees, there's also something to consider called impact fees. And those are, I would like to tie into the city's stormwater system. That typically those cities now have some fees which can be 50, $100,000. And then on the sort of the tail end of the project, everything that makes it special, the furniture, the fixtures, the equipment. Are you going to have a full kitchen? What sort of equipment needs do I have both inside and outside of the building? On the timeline side, the timeline is the site acquisition, the design development process, which is answering the questions that we just talked about, and then turning all those answers into a deliverable set of drawings and documents that allow whether it's a new construction or a renovation. And then we talked about the project permitting fees. That permitting timeline can be anywhere from 2 months on the short end to 6 to 8 months on the longer end. And then that also includes some pricing negotiation and value engineering with your general contractor, who would be the person that would be building the project. And then there's the timing to actually build what we've envisioned. And some of these overlap, obviously, as you're building, you would be able to market that to the new community that you're going into. State licensing in Texas is great that we are able to sort of pre-introduce them to the project. You can reach out to whoever your licensing person at the state is and sort of let them vet the design early so that when you have that actual opening licensing inspection, it goes pretty smoothly because they're aware of what they're walking into. All of those things sort of make up the timeline of creating a new school or creating a new expanded facility. So site selection, there's nothing on a site. This would just be like a raw piece of land. The good things to that is that nothing in place. We have a lot of flexibility and freedom, sort of where do we place the building? What's the orientation? What are the natural amenities to the site? Are there some lovely trees worth preserving? And then, of course, there's not demolition needed. So it's a little bit easier to develop. Infrastructure customization, that's essentially the playgrounds, the parking, all of that. How do we address that? And so again, it's a little more open-ended when it's a new development. The cons are these projects tend to take a little longer because there's more regulatory involvement, more things to say yes and no to with the city and the county. And then what are the environmental regulations that we need to address when we're looking at a new site? Some of those include like wetland preservation and stormwater quality, and then also even like if there's any sort of endangered species. All of those things we look at very, very early side of the project. Site selection, renovation. Did we find a building that has never been a preschool before? Is it something that's totally new? Or did we find another preschool that just needs some sort of freshening up? There's a cost savings to this because obviously you've got a structure, you've got all that built material that's there. Typically, these types of projects can go through a little bit of an expedited review process because there's less things to be checked, like structure, electrical loads, all of those things. And again, like we said, that sustainability of reusing a building is just wonderful. And then the location benefits, you have a little bit more sort of certainty in your neighbors and in the flows of traffic because all of that stuff tends to be in an established area. The cons, maybe you don't necessarily start off with a slate that was in your original mindset of what you wanted. So there's some design constraints there. We have to work with what the existing building is. And so as you start to scratch the surface of that remodel renovation project, you can get into some of these unforeseen costs, whether those are, aging electrical equipment or aging mechanical equipment. We always recommend doing an environmental site assessment so you can see things like asbestos and lead-based paint. Some of those things are unforeseen costs, which would definitely need to be mitigated. And then we have wonderful accessibility codes in the United States. So if you're looking at an older facility, sometimes getting those older facilities up to par with the new accessibility laws can be a bit of a challenge. So that would be a negative on the renovation side. Let's say you have an existing school and you are just bursting at the seams. One thing to consider is an addition. If you've got the physical real estate, the space to do that, an addition can be a really smart way to grow your program. There's some definite cost savings because you're not starting from scratch. It tends to be faster. And then you can also grow your capacity without relocating your school.
Someone asked if maybe portables might be something they could use as part of that solution.
Portables, they offer sort of maximum flexibility because they can be quickly deployed. They do, as a building type, tend to age out. So a lot of them have a lifespan of sort of 10 years or less. So sometimes portable buildings are made with materials that aren't necessarily conducive to the raising of young children. Okay, so the cons of that are, you've got some limitations on your site. Maybe it's a really hilly site. Is adding onto my building going to be cost prohibitive because of structural reasons? How do I maintain my very healthy and growing program out of chaos while, literally feet away, we're building a new building? So you could look at things like staging that with your contractor, or maybe agreeing to working in the evenings or working early, or working weekends. And then, of course, as materials age out, whether they're bricks or paint or carpet, sometimes it's hard to sort of patch match those old things to the new. So another benefit of that is maybe the older portion of the space gets a little bit of a sprucing up. And then again, anytime we're dealing with an addition or a renovation, there's always some potential hidden costs that you are not always easy to plan for in the very beginning. In this project team, the architect tends to manage the consultants and all of the experts that you've got going in. And then obviously the general contractor, the boots on the ground to get this building or this renovation sort of up and running. So we all three deal with the regulatory. So with the city, with the state, with licensing, with permitting, all three of us will have a hand in dealing with regulatory components. As I said, the architect tends to be the manager of the team, so sort of the quarterback, to use a football reference. Civil engineers are largely focused on site development, infrastructure, utilities, how do I connect power to my building, and all of those things. Structural engineers, obviously working with us, help figure out how to make sure the building stands up. MEP stands for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. So they deal with the systems within the building, making sure that it stays cool in the summer and warm in the winter, and that the lights are operating properly, and obviously that we have all the plumbing. And then, of course, on the outside of the building, landscape. A lot of people think landscape architect just about plants and trees. They also handle drainage, irrigation, and just the general feel of the outdoor space. So all four of those sort of subcomponents are a very important part of our team as we go to develop this new project. Again, the owner would then take the lead on the licensing decisions, the scheduling associated with licensing, and then the FF&E, which is the furnishings, fixtures, and equipment. So some of those decisions obviously would be guided by your professional project team, but those decisions ultimately fall on the owner, and a lot of times those are budget-based decisions as well. As you're putting your project budget together, it's a wonderful line item to have on there. We all know that classrooms are very furniture intense, and through that state licensing process, before you even have a child in your building, that building has to be turnkey ready. All of the toys are on the shelves. The food is in the refrigerator. It's stored at the proper temperature. So that FF&E item for preschools is not one to underestimate. It's an important component. The general contractor, they sort of quarterback their team. Subcontractors, so whether they're electricians, foundation, framing, and then the vendors, the different vendors that are inside of the building, that could be security vendors. Sometimes we do customized water filtration systems in schools, which is a wonderful access, but that's a separate vendor. So the general contractor manages all those sort of processes during the construction. So I've got on the screen just a couple of portfolio images to go through of some schools that we've recently completed. The image on the left, it's a stepping stone school, and one of the things that we really loved about this building was the way that the light changed throughout the day. We were able to sort of build, you can see in that sort of egg-shaped space within a space, a reading center, and then there's a larger area in front, which is more for gross motor. And we did something here. We used a sustainable carpet tile, gives the user a little bit of flexibility to sort of pop those up and refresh those. Those can be handy in sort of high use areas. These buildings obviously are the first buildings that children are in outside of the home, so they shouldn't feel too institutional. And then using sort of residential type finishes and window placements and scales, all those things are important to help children transition from being in the home to being out of the home. Again, landscape architecture, landscape outside spaces need distinct consideration. Sort of the manufactured turf industry has really had a big impact on playground areas outside. We like it because it's durable. We don't like it because it's hot. So I think anybody who's had a school in Texas or in the South or Southwest knows that sometimes that turf in the summertime can be 40, 50 degrees hotter than the ambient air. So there's some definite concerns for the outdoor. Always looking for great ways to get in shade in Texas. The project on the left is actually a school that went into a shopping center, like a strip center, and we were able to claim back some of the space behind the building in the former parking lot under a great tree and get what we think is a pretty meaningful outdoor play space. You can see this door that we've got into this pre-kinder classroom on the right. We like to use these long, skinny view windows. If a family is sort of struggling with an early transition, it gives the ability for the parent to sort of observe from the outside without being too distracting to the classroom. And that's because we keep it a little skinny, so there's not as much of a visual movement from inside the classroom if somebody's using that view window. We also like to pull those down pretty low so that you can see the clear floor space in front of the door. So when that door is swinging, is there a child there that's playing or reading a book or something that I need to be aware of? And again, that idea of creating spaces for the whole community, indoor spaces that are focused on the parents' needs as much as the children's needs. You can see that in the photo on the right. There's a nice sort of place if you needed to take a call in the morning, you could grab a coffee and sit. And then we don't always have to age separate playgrounds. If you see the image on the left, in the far distance, there's a shade structure and climbing structure that's for toddlers, and then near to us is obviously the more robust pre-K. This provider, we didn't put a fence in that playground, and it sort of has been very helpful for them. It helps their teachers and administrators can sort of teach self-regulation and child behavior patterns develop because those two spaces are open to each other. Montessori and Reggio Emilia tend to pull color out of classrooms and out of spaces and let the child generate those. We agree with that, but sometimes you have programs where color comes front and center. And so the project on the left, a Stepping Stone School project where we were able to use color therapy and the lights to sort of change the mood of the space throughout the day. And then we cut holes in the floor of the school. We've got sort of museum-like exhibits within the floor that talk about how water works its way into the Edwards Aquifer. And another one sort of illustrates the different layers of the earth. So what are the things that the building can do to be the third teacher in your program? That's a big aspect of our design. And again, making the use of your site resources. You can see this big, beautiful tree in the middle of the playground on the right. How can we build a school that envelops that and really embraces that? And that's such a teachable moment for children. The photo on the right, again, talks about water. You see we have rain chains that collect water, and then that collects in a big rainstorm, and we can teach children about ecology and hydrology and high-level topics that can really spur young minds in unique ways. And then creating spaces on the left that really focus on child scale, accessibility, reachability, and open and creative spaces. You can see there's no color on the walls on the space on the left. All the color literally comes in this Montessori program from the creativity of the children.